For joining us. We have a great group today. I'm Candace Shively with Utah State University Extension, and these monthly webinars are supported by USU Center for Water Efficient Landscaping. Today, we're fortunate to have Colton Smith joining us. Colton is currently a senior at USU studying agriculture education, and he's graduating in just a couple months. He has interned with USU Extension for the past couple summers, working at Bridger Park Community Garden in Logan, Utah, which has about 50 raised boxes that were built in 2017. And then in 2018 and 19, drip irrigation and soil moisture monitoring, a soil moisture monitoring system was installed. So if you joined us in October, we covered Drip Irrigation 101. If you missed that webinar, it is recorded and it's up on our YouTube channel. Today, Colton is going to expand on that webinar by tying in the practical aspect and the practical application, as well as scheduling. He's briefly going to review the main drip components, walk you through the pros and cons, and talk about some of the troubles that they've ran into at the garden along the way. And then as a bonus, he'll summarize the findings of a tomato watering project that they did over the past summer. So with that, I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen and turn the time over to Colton.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for that introduction. Well, yeah, so like she said, I'm Colton Smith. I'm about to graduate here pretty soon, already feeling the senioritis. So, but it's really exciting. And I'm actually excited to work at the gardens again this coming summer. We're going to finish doing some research like she mentioned, and I'm really excited to show you guys everything we learned about drip irrigation. I spent 2 summers now of my life just completely dedicated to building this garden up and to install this drip irrigation system. I've learned quite a bit, and I'm really happy to share what we've learned. I saw that we actually have another, one of our master gardeners from Cache County joining us, so that was really cool to see. So feel free in the comment section to add questions or maybe add your experience with it. That'd be awesome. So we're just going to get right into it. She already did an introduction or overview, but I'm going to be talking about these community gardens that we've applied all this stuff in. We're going to talk about, the purpose of it and how we installed it into these community gardens, and do an overview of the parts of the drip irrigation, and talk about like how we're going to apply each part. Just again, because that previous webinar did a really good job talking about each individual piece. And then again, at the end, we'll talk about some of the research that we have going on, some of our findings, some of our future plans, and how we're going to apply it. So to start off, Bridger Park Community Garden is basically a cooperative effort between Logan City and USU Extension to provide people with an opportunity to garden. This is for people who either have like an apartment or a townhouse, or they don't really have an opportunity to have a garden in their own place. And it's also for people to come and learn. Our Master Gardener program uses this plot as like a home base to be able to, learn things and practice things that they've learned in the classroom. They also do a lot of service. They've done a lot of education to the people who rent out these garden spots. They've helped us so much with the research and have helped share the message from our research. And we've actually also had our Food Sense program come in and actually help. It's been really cool to see them teach people who rent these plots different recipes that they can make from what they're growing. So it's been a very successful community garden. We've been very happy with it, especially with the drip irrigation. Because, here in Utah as well, but other places all over the world, we really got to work on conserving water. And USU Extension has really made that a serious priority. So here at Bridger Park, we've made a huge effort to, install a very effective drip irrigation and teach people how to save water with that. So a brief overview of drip system, like what is drip irrigation? Very simply, it's a small scale irrigation system that you can apply to a garden bed, whether it be for vegetable gardens or a flower bed, or even for trees and shrubs. And again, it's just a very slow rate of flow. We can actually talk about it with the numbers. It can add up. You can actually get a lot of water very quickly. But the purpose of it is to basically conserve water and to water just the root system. And we'll talk about the pros and cons, and again, an overview of the parts. So the first thing that comes to mind with the drip irrigation system is that you want to save water. I'm pretty sure that's what most of you guys are here to do. Drip irrigation does an amazing job at conserving water as compared to like maybe a rotor or a pop-up spray, just because there's so many conditions that make it waste water, either with overspray, you know, you're spraying on sidewalks, or the wind will pick up the water and carry it away, or evaporation. But with drip irrigation, you don't have it, like those things hardly at all. You know, all the water goes directly to the roots, to the soil. You know, with a slow rate of water, you can control it a lot easier about how much water your plants are getting. It encourages deep root growth because it flows through the soil a lot better. I mean, like it says there, you can do it in a number of conditions. There are some downsides though to drip irrigation. Very few. I mean, I'm a big advocate for drip, but there's always the other side of the coin. We recommend to use only culinary water. Like you definitely can use irrigation water for sure, but we've actually had some master gardeners who've applied a drip irrigation with secondary water, and they said it's been very difficult, that they have to change their filters out once a week. They have a lot of clogging happening. So you need to be very careful with the water that you use, because it could clog up the system very easily, especially with all the different pieces and the small parts. People are actually still prone to overwatering, believe it or not. With that moral hazard, you think, oh, I've got a drip system now, it's impossible to overwater. It's a very common misconception. You can actually still overwater. So we're going to talk about how to avoid that, especially with scheduling. We can help overcome that, but still people will tend to do that. And finally, upfront costs can be quite a bit. There's a lot of pieces to it. Like for me, I think of it like adult Legos, where there's a lot of missing, like matching. However, like it can cost quite a bit to install in the first place. You might be able to recoup some of that cost from as much water as you save, but up in the beginning, it's still quite a bit. So then to move on to the parts, like she said, there was another webinar that was done that goes a little bit deeper into the parts. So we're just going to do like a broad overview. These are the parts that we're going to go over that we'll kind of talk about application for each one. So first with the piping, the main line you'll use is just a normal, that we've used at Bridger Park, is just a normal Schedule 40 PVC. The diameters we use are about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. So nothing too big, nothing too crazy going. And you can see that part of the construction process, we dug ours about 2 feet deep. It doesn't have to be quite that deep. Excuse me. Like my colleague and I like to go above and beyond. So we went 2 feet deep, but you'd be okay about 18 inches underground. So for your main pipe, we use that PVC, but we also use some other called polyethylene tubing. And I circled that with the blue circle there for you to see right here. This is really good to use for drip irrigation because it's very malleable, and you know, you can either have it bend around corners, or in our case, we use this to go down underneath the garden beds so that you know, you didn't trip on anything and you only just have a small part coming up into the bed. So this is used very frequently, and depending on your personal situation, whether it's in a flower bed or garden bed, whatever, or a vegetable bed, you can use that for your advantage. And then another like quick note is to, same with your same irrigation system for your lawn, you want to make sure you blow out the lines every fall, because if they do freeze, no matter how deep you go, they do tend to freeze and the lines will break. So, you know, when you're putting in an irrigation system, be sure to keep these things in mind with the piping and then blowing out the lines. Now, this is something that you'll see very common. This is your valve and the filter. Basically, this is like the manifold for your zone, for your drip system. Now, over here on the left, you'll see that the valve is connected to the controller. And actually at Bridger Park, our controller is connected to a very small solar panel. It's just up on top of the shed. It's about the size of a cell phone. It's really small. It doesn't need a lot of energy to control. In fact, it can run off of a D battery for well over a year. So it doesn't require a lot of electricity. It's very self-sustaining, which is really cool. And so you can, this right here is where you have like the electrical system sends a signal to this to either lower or raise it to let the water flow through. And then this right here is also like a handle, so you can manually open it and close it as you need in case your electrical system doesn't work. And over here on the right is where your filter is. So with the flow of water, it comes through here through the valve, and then it'll go run up here in the filter, and it also helps regulate the pressure. And then it'll come back down and then flow to the rest of your zone. Now, it's really important that this pressure regulator is set correctly. With drip irrigation, you don't want a lot of pressure. It works really well between 15 to 20 psi, but with sprinklers, like your pop-up sprinklers or your rotor sprinklers, that would be anywhere from 30 to 80. So if you're trying to adapt a zone to go from maybe like a lawn, or like maybe you have rotors or pop-ups for a flower bed, you really got to watch what your PSI is at, because if you try to adapt it, you could have parts blowing out or have a different flow rate. And we'll actually talk about that later on from our research, because we actually had a different flow rate because we had more pressure coming through the lines. So now we'll talk about the different types of emitters. So this was actually my favorite part. This was like the Lego part. You can customize this. You can change these and swap them out depending on your needs of your personal garden beds. But the first type of emitter we'll go over is the inline emitters. So this is basically where the emitters are inside and where they kind of control the flow from inside the tube itself. And you can purchase these based on different needs. First one is the spacing between emitters. You can have up to 6 inches between each emitter in the line, up to 12 inches. I've even seen something up to 18 inches. That's not very common. You won't really see that in residential. 6 inches to 12 inches is a lot more common. And again, it just depends on how dense of a flower bed you have or your vegetable garden. And then you'll also want to consider the diameter of the tubing. So you can have a spaghetti tubing, which is about 1/8 of an inch in diameter. And that's what we have in our garden beds. So you can see here on the right-hand picture. So we have these 4 spaghetti tubes running through the bed. There's another one kind of hidden right here. And that works really great for smaller areas and smaller plants. Or you can use larger tubing, which can vary from 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch. And that's what we have here with this tree. And this tree is actually here at the USU Botanical Center in Kaysville. But what they've done, because trees have a lot larger root system that tend to spread out, they've actually used an inline drip system to ring around and to catch those extended roots. And so it just flows straight down through, and you can catch those roots, and it just loops around and saves water. So it's a really creative way to use inline drip for a variety of plants. Again, usually it's used for dense flower beds or vegetable gardens with the inline emitters. But as you can see here, there's a lot of applications you can use for trees as well, or even larger shrubs. So this next type of emitter is just, I call it an inline emitter. Some people just call it drip emitters. I know, tomato, tomato. But what's cool about this one is you can actually customize it a lot more. With the previous one, I'll go back real quick. With the previous, you only have a set flow rate throughout the whole line. It'll either be about 1/4 of a gallon to 1/2 a gallon per hour throughout the whole line, and you can't really change that. But with these type of emitters, you can customize it however you want. So with the different spray patterns, if you look up here at the top, it's kind of hard to see, but you have a small little sprinkler right here. They'll actually spray out. This kind of like defeats a lot of the benefits of a drip, because like it still sprays out and the wind will carry that water away. Sorry. It'll carry that water away. So we don't really use these. We experimented a little bit with them. And that's the important thing to know about drip, is a lot of trial and error. There's so many different pieces and so many different kinds you can use. But the cool thing about drip is you can try it, like there's many ways to make it work. So with these different kind of emitters you see at the bottom, they're color coded depending on their flow rate. So this doesn't have all of the pictures. It was actually really hard to find pictures of these different emitters. But most commonly what you'll find are either blue, black, red, light brown, or green. Here's like that green, here's that red. So that's about half a gallon per hour, 1 gallon, 2, 5, and 10 gallons per hour. And excuse me guys, just getting over a cold. So what's cool about these is that you can customize, like we were saying. So down here in the bottom left, you can see that we have a demonstration pollinator garden, which is really helpful to like teach how to like be water wise. And we use these kind of emitters. Should have gotten some water beforehand. But with each of these flowers, we actually use only 1 gallon per hour. That's typically what you'll use for flowers or for vegetable gardens. But in the back, you'll actually see that we have a grape trellis right here, and we have grapes in between, and we actually use 2 gallons per hour for this one. And so it just depends on the flow rate you want. For our shrubs as well, we also used shrubs. We used 2 gallons per hour for the shrubs. And for like our larger bushes, like are not viewed in that picture. So now we're going to talk about the watering schedule. This one's really important. I honestly feel like this is where you're going to save most of your water. You can have the greatest drip system in the world. You can have it fine-tuned to a T, have it going to every plant, but unless you use it correctly, you can still waste a lot of water like we talked about earlier. Oh, excuse me. So this right here came from USU. This is a typical watering schedule for lawns, but also like shrubs, annuals, and perennials. And a common misconception, and something that people do a lot here in Utah, is they'll water like at least 5 to 7 times a week. And like that's way too much. A lot of the problem comes from like our behaviors and thinking that we need to overwater. But really, a lot of our plants can get away with only watering 2 to 3 times a week. And as you can see here, that schedule changes. So in May and September, you can get away with 1 to 2 times a week. But in the heat of the summer, you really only need 3 times a week. You know, that will encourage greater root depth. Because you can see right here, you know, your root depth varies depending on your plants, again, 18 to 48 inches. But this infrequent watering, if you water more or less, that'll encourage the roots to go deeper. The water will flow down through the soil better, the roots will chase it, and if you have a deeper root system, then you'll have more drought tolerant plants, and they'll be a lot healthier. So as you guys are creating your own garden beds, either flower beds or vegetable gardens, it's really important to understand the scheduling. And the USU Extension has many, many sources for that you can look at about different scheduling. I've also worked over the summers with a water check program where we actually go to people's houses and we'll do a custom check of, we'll check their flow rate, how fast, like, you know, how much water their sprinklers are putting out, and it'll create a custom schedule for them. That's very similar to this. It's all based on, again, about 2 to 3 times a week. It's a really neat program. You guys should definitely check it out, the USU Extension Water Check Program, and they can help you explain more of that. So again, if your goal is to save water, this really comes down to the scheduling and the different components we've talked about earlier. So here at this last part, this is a research poster that we presented at the Extension Annual Conference here at USU a few weeks ago. And it kind of explains about Bridger Park, but this is our application. So this is how we applied it to the different beds in our community garden. And we dedicated 10 beds in the community garden for research. So if you look here, we used 9 of them because they were in rows of 10, but we used 9 raised garden beds. They're about 6 inches deep, which is very typical of what you'll see in an average home. We had 3 different watering zones. So you can see that we had low, medium, and high. And we wanted to compare specifically for tomatoes, how much water they'll need. And that was the goal, because a lot of homeowners will use a lot of water, and the high was actually our baseline data. And so we want to see if we can get away with using less water to grow tomatoes. So what we did is we had 4 tomato plants per garden box, and then we watered 3 times a week, just Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we changed the watering times because you only have one flow rate, but you can change how long your watering time is. So down here, you can kind of see what our flow rate was with the drip irrigation numbers. So we used, as you saw, the spaghetti tubing, the 1/4-inch drip tubing. We had 6-inch emitters. Well, emitters 6 inches apart. And we had 4 tubes. Now, looking back again, we like to go like above and beyond. And so looking back, that's probably quite a bit for our beds. You can probably get away with only using about 2 of those kind of lines. But, we installed 4, so we went with it. And you can actually see how much water we were actually getting. That's why it's really important to understand what your pressure is, because with our inline tubing, it was rated at 1/2 gallon per hour at 20 psi. But we actually went back and measured, and we were getting about 30 psi, which is quite a bit more. So that actually raised going from 1/2 gallon to actually 0.8 gallons per hour. And then doing the math, we had about 94 emitters in our raised bed. So probably about 75 gallons in an hour per bed, which is a lot of water. I mean, each plant was getting 18 gallons a week. So you can see that there still is a chance to overwater for sure. And we're glad we caught this when we did. We found this about like halfway about how much we were really watering when we did the true flow rate. So now summer 2020, we're really excited to continue this research and to kind of fine tune our watering schedules. Now we know the correct output, and we finally finished the soil moisture meters. We weren't able to quite use them last year, but we finally have installed them this summer. So we're really excited to get data from that. But after we've done all this and put this in together, we got our results. Davis County did it similar, although they actually had some people come and break in and take some of their plants. So, and then they had like a few different variables. So a lot of their data is a little bit different than ours. But over here at ours, you can see like our results from, our different numbers and how much water they were getting. So what we did is we collected the tomatoes every 3 days between July and October. And the low irrigated got 116. But what's interesting is the medium and the high was only 10 pounds difference in produce, which is pretty incredible actually. And what was another interesting to know is that in the high irrigation, because they're getting so much water so fast, there was a lot of splitting going on. A lot of the tomatoes would split, and then bugs would get in. So there's actually not a lot of good produce from that. So we found that actually the medium irrigation, that less was more, that you're able to get a lot more quality produce from it. And again, we're really excited to start this again next summer, compare multiple years, see if we get the same data. But I wish I had our schedule online. I wasn't actually able to find the document. I'm down here in Davis County and everything's up in Cache County. But if you guys, again, in the questions, you can feel free to ask what the watering times were, or how much water each plant was getting. So that's what these were here. Each plant was getting 18 gallons. Each plant was getting 14 gallons and 9 gallons in the different watering systems. So, that was our research. That's what we've done. And that's kind of the story of how we applied drip irrigation. Again, it's been a really incredible journey to learn more about drip irrigation and apply it and to teach others how to save water. It's amazing how much less water people used in their own garden beds. Like over here, people watered a lot less when they found out that we were watering. Some people still continue to water, which was quite fascinating. But once they saw how we were doing it, they went and applied it at their own home. And, if you fine tune your own home, like really assess your needs, there's a lot of fact sheets from USU that talk about, the watering needs. And so you can choose the right kind of emitters that fit, whether it's inline or inline emitters. And then you can change your watering schedule. If you do all those things, you're going to save a lot of water. And little by little, if you share that with people, then you're going to really save a lot of water overall.
All right. Well, thank you, Colton, and thank you guys for joining us. And we'll see you all next month, hopefully. Have a great rest of your week.
You too. Thanks.